So you want to own a coffee shop, but not another white wall cafe with exposed concrete, a $12,000 espresso machine, and a barista explaining where your Ethiopian beans experienced emotional growth. No, you want something different. You want Vietnam. Imagine a busy street in Los Angeles. Between a taco restaurant and a boutique gym sits a tiny storefront. Outside are tiny red and blue plastic stools, low stainless steel tables, condensed milk cans stacked behind the counter, a handwritten menu, a metal coffee filter slowly dripping into a glass, and 20 Americans sitting 6 inches above the pavement, wondering why this might be the best coffee they have ever tasted. Welcome to your Vietnamese sidewalk cafe. In Vietnam, this setup might look completely ordinary. In Los Angeles, it is an experience, and Americans pay very well for experiences. The question is, can something that costs a few dollars on a Vietnamese sidewalk become a profitable business in one of America's most expensive cities? Let's find out. First, we need a location. You do not need 2,000 square feet. That would destroy the entire idea. Your shop should feel compact, a little crowded, a little noisy, almost like customers accidentally walked through a doorway in Los Angeles and came out somewhere in Saigon. Let's say you find an 800 square foot former coffee shop in a busy neighborhood. That detail matters. Because if you start with an empty commercial shell and need to install every drain, sink, restroom, electrical line, and food service connection from scratch, your $140,000 budget may die before the first coffee bean arrives. A second-generation cafe gives you a fighting chance. There is enough room for a counter, drink station, refrigeration, storage, and maybe 14 indoor seats. Outside, another 12 to 18 customers can sit on small stools and low tables. We will model the rent at about $1,500 per month. That is expensive, but this is Los Angeles, and location is doing part of your advertising. A cheap cafe hidden somewhere nobody walks past is not cheap. It is just empty. Now comes your first surprise. Those plastic stools might cost almost nothing. The permission to put them outside does not. Because unfortunately, America has regulations. You cannot simply scatter 30 stools across a public sidewalk and declare it Little Saigon. There are health permits, building requirements, fire requirements, accessibility rules, outdoor dining approvals, possibly a permit for using the public right-of-way. Your authentic Vietnamese sidewalk experience must first survive American bureaucracy. Welcome to entrepreneurship. Before selling one cup of coffee, let's build the shop. Lease deposit and first payments, about $15,000. Design, permits, plan review, and professional fees, around $8,000. Basic renovation, plumbing, and electrical modifications, maybe $38,000. Remember, this only works because you took over a former cafe where much of the expensive infrastructure already exists. Equipment, around $25,000. But here is where your Vietnamese concept has an advantage. A normal specialty cafe may spend enormous money on espresso machines, grinders, and complicated brewing systems. You do not need nearly as much. Your hero product comes from one of the simplest coffee makers on earth. The Fin. A small metal chamber, coffee, hot water, gravity, done. You still need commercial refrigerators, ice machines, sinks, filtration, grinders, brewing equipment, storage, and probably a dishwasher. But your equipment package can remain relatively lean. Furniture, signage, and decoration, $8,000. Small wares, glasses, fin filters, and containers, $5,000. Opening inventory, $3,000. POS system, cameras, and technology, $2,000. POS system, cameras, and technology, $2,000. Pre-opening payroll and marketing, $6,000. Then keep roughly $30,000 in working capital. Because the fastest way to kill a new restaurant is to spend every dollar opening it. Total estimated investment, about $140,000. Could you open cheaper? Absolutely. Take over a cafe that needs almost no renovation, and maybe you save tens of thousands. Could you spend more? Also, absolutely. This is construction. Someone will eventually discover a pipe somewhere that costs $7,000 to move. Now let's talk about the product. Vietnamese coffee has one enormous advantage in the American market. It does not taste like normal American coffee. Traditional Vietnamese coffee often leans heavier, darker, and more intense. Then you add condensed milk, ice, sweetness, and suddenly you have something somewhere between coffee, dessert, and controlled substance. Your basic menu might look like this. Sa phen, $5.50. Sa phen cent 50s. Sa phens, somwa, phens dollars, 50 cent. Bihuz, sex bithen cent, salt coffee, $7.50. Salt coffee, $7. Egg coffee, $8. Coconut coffee, $8. Coconut coffee. A customer looking at this menu has probably already seen a latte for $7 somewhere else in Los Angeles, so your pricing does not feel insane, but your product feels much more unusual. That difference matters, because you are not competing with Starbucks by being cheaper than Starbucks. That is a terrible idea. Starbucks has thousands of stores. You have 12 plastic chairs. You compete by being memorable. Imagine an American customer ordering Sa phen's for the first time. They see condensed milk sitting at the bottom, dark coffee dripping slowly on top. Then everything is poured over ice. They take a sip, very sweet, very strong. 5 minutes later, they are considering reorganizing their entire garage. That experience is your marketing. But now we encounter another problem. The fin is slow. Beautifully slow, annoyingly slow. A traditional individual fin can take several minutes. That is charming when 3 people are sitting on a sidewalk. It becomes less charming when 40 office workers arrive at 8:15 in the morning. Your customer does not want cultural authenticity badly enough to miss work, so the business needs 2 versions of the same product: the theater and the machine behind the theater. You can still prepare individual fins where customers can see them. But during rush periods, you may use larger commercial Vietnamese-style brewers or prepare concentrated coffee in controlled batches. Same beans, same recipe, same flavor target, much faster service. This is important. Authenticity does not mean reproducing every inconvenience. Nobody opens an Italian restaurant and insists customers travel there by horse. Now let's look at 1 cup. Take your 6.50 ses sufes humwawa, coffee beans, condensed milk, ice, cup, straw, napkin, waste. Your direct ingredient and packaging cost might land somewhere around 1.50 ses to $2, depending on your coffee and serving size. Let's model $1.75 ses to $2, depending on your coffee and serving size. Let's model $1.75. Sell it for 6.50. That leaves $4.75 before labor, rent, utilities, insurance, card fees, and everything else trying to eat your money. That is why beverages are attractive. The ingredients are inexpensive compared with the selling price. But gross margin is not profit. This distinction has destroyed many beautiful cafes. Let's open the shop. You work there yourself. Your partner helps. Maybe another family member covers some shifts. And you employ a small team of baristas working a mix of part-time and near full-time shifts. In Los Angeles, we will budget roughly $20 to $22 per paid labor hour once you want people who actually show up consistently. Add payroll taxes, insurance, and related employment costs. Your monthly labor expense could easily reach about $13,000, even with the owner working heavily inside the business. Rent, $5,500. Utilities and internet, $1,500. Insurance, $600. Cleaning and waste, $700. Marketing, $800. Repairs, software and miscellaneous expenses, maybe $1,200. Payment processing takes another piece from every card transaction, and almost everyone is paying by card. Your cafe now needs serious volume. Let's say your average customer spends $8.75. That number is higher than the price of 1 basic coffee, because some customers add pastries, snacks, premium drinks, extra items, or occasionally order for more than 1 person. At 100 transactions per day, you generate about $26,250 per month. Sounds good. It isn't. At that sales level, after ingredients, labor, and overhead, this shop could lose more than $8,000 per month. Your adorable plastic stools are now sitting outside a financial crime scene. At 140 transactions a day, about $36,750 in monthly revenue, you are roughly around break-even. At 160 transactions, $42,000. Now maybe you generate around $3,000 in monthly owner earnings before taxes and debt payments. Not terrible. But remember, you are probably working there 6 days a week. You have not purchased a passive investment. You purchased a job with Vietnamese coffee. Now reach 180 transactions per day. Revenue, about $47,250 per month. Under our model, the shop could produce roughly $6,500 in monthly owner earnings before taxes and debt payments. Around $79,000 per year. Better. But do not confuse owner earnings with passive profit. You are working in this shop. A lot. Part of that $79,000 is return on your investment. Part of it is compensation for the fact that you have apparently decided weekends are no longer necessary. At 200 transactions per day, $52,500 per month. Potential owner earnings climb to around $10,000. Now the business becomes interesting, and at 220 transactions a day, nearly $58,000 per month. Potential owner earnings, around $14,000. More than $160,000 annually if that volume stays consistent. But there is a catch. It never stays perfectly consistent. January is different from July. Monday is different from Saturday. Rain exists, employees quit, refrigerators die. The ice machine will wait until your busiest weekend before discovering its passion for unemployment. And TikTok cannot pay your rent forever. So your real job is creating repeat customers. The Vietnamese sidewalk concept might bring somebody in once. Coffee quality brings them back. Convenience brings them back again. Community makes them stay. This is where the tiny plastic stools become surprisingly important. American cafes are becoming optimized for laptops, large tables, outlets, headphones. Everyone sits together while pretending nobody else exists. Vietnamese street coffee can offer the opposite. Small tables, close seating. Short visits. Small tables. Close seating. Short visits. Conversation. People watching the street. You are selling an environment where customers are allowed to do almost nothing. That sounds strange, but that is exactly what makes cafe culture valuable. And there are ways to make the American customer curious without turning Vietnam into a costume. Do not cover every wall with conical hats. Do not put fake scooters everywhere. Do not build Disneyland, Saigon edition. Keep it simple. A Vietnamese street number sign. A few stainless steel tables. Plastic stools. Old Vietnamese advertisements. Condensed milk cans. Maybe the sound of ice hitting metal cups. Coffee dripping from fins. The smell of roasted coffee. The concept should feel like somebody transported a real neighborhood cafe to Los Angeles. Not like an American designer searched Vietnam aesthetic on Pinterest. Then create rituals. Maybe every table gets a small thermos of tea. Maybe customers receive their coffee with a tiny glass of iced tea. Maybe the menu teaches them the difference between cafes. Putte, så nu med ad udder and bunker ma shink exergade in one sentence. Maybe you offer a Vietnamese coffee flight. 3 miniature glasses, black. Condensed milk, salt coffee. Suddenly, a $6 beverage becomes an $18 experience, and people film it. This is where your marketing can become ridiculously efficient. A normal cafe has to convince customers that its brown liquid is different from everybody else's brown liquid. You have visual ammunition everywhere. Coffee dripping through a fin. Condensed milk layers. Salt foam. Egg cream. Coconut slush. Tiny chairs. Customers tasting robust coffee for the first time. You do not need to manufacture content. Your operation already looks like content. A 20-second video titled "Americans Try Vietnamese Coffee for the First Time" can advertise the product better than a polished commercial. And occasionally someone will comment, "That is not authentic Vietnamese coffee. Congratulations, you have now achieved social media engagement." But novelty creates another danger. You may attract tourists instead of customers. If everybody visits once, photographs the chair, posts it to Instagram, and never returns, you do not own a cafe. You own a photo booth with expensive plumbing. So underneath the concept, the economics must remain boring: fast service, consistent drinks, correct portion sizes, controlled labor, minimal waste, reliable opening hours, clean bathrooms, good parking or strong pedestrian traffic. Every glamorous hospitality concept eventually becomes a spreadsheet. Now consider food. This is where many owners get greedy. You start with coffee. Then somebody wants banh mi, then banh mi, and then noodles, then fried food. Then suddenly your simple coffee shop has become a restaurant. More preparation, more refrigeration, more equipment, more employees, more waste, more health code complexity. And your kitchen is now bigger than your seating area. For store number 1, keep food secondary. Maybe a small collection of Vietnamese pastries and easy grab-and-go items from approved suppliers. Let coffee remain the engine. If customers constantly ask for banh mi, wonderful. That is data. Expand later. Expand later. Do not build an entire kitchen because your cousin thinks people might want noodles. There is another advantage to staying small. A small store can feel busy very quickly. 20 customers inside and outside an 800-square-foot cafe creates energy. Put those same 20 people inside 2,500 square feet, and it looks like the restaurant is failing. Density is part of the product. Vietnamese sidewalk cafes already understand this. The expensive American version just calls it atmosphere. So when do you get your $140,000 back? Suppose the shop eventually stabilizes around $80,000 in yearly owner earnings before taxes and debt payments. In theory, you recover your original investment in less than 2 years. In reality, probably longer. Opening months may lose money. Equipment breaks. You may have debt. Taxes exist. And some of those owner earnings are paying you for the hundreds of hours you personally spend behind the counter. A more reasonable target might be roughly 3 to 4 years to recover the investment if the business performs well. If it performs badly, there is no recovery period. There is Craigslist. Likely used commercial ice machine. $2,000. Please buy immediately. But let's say it works. Now you face the next decision. Do you open another location? This concept can scale surprisingly well because the menu is beverage heavy, the footprint is small. Equipment requirements are lighter than a full restaurant. The visual identity is easy to recognize. And Vietnamese coffee has enough product differentiation that another generic cafe cannot perfectly copy the experience by adding one drink to its menu. Store number 2 might open in San Diego, then San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Austin. Suddenly those cheap plastic stools become part of a recognizable brand. But scaling introduces a philosophical problem. How do you mass-produce something whose appeal comes from feeling informal? If every stool is perfectly positioned, every wall professionally distressed, every handwritten sign produced by corporate design, you may accidentally create the exact thing you were trying to avoid. The magic is controlled imperfection. The business system should be standardized. The customer experience should not feel standardized. And that may be your strongest advantage. Because this shop is not really selling coffee from Vietnam. Coffee beans can be bought by anyone. Condensed milk can be bought by anyone. Fin filters cost almost nothing. What customers are paying for is a small piece of Vietnamese daily life transplanted into an American city. They sit on a plastic stool. Traffic moves past them. Ice melts in a glass. Coffee drips slowly. Someone at the next table is talking too loudly. Nobody is asking them to understand tasting notes. Nobody is explaining citrus acidity. It is simply strong coffee, condensed milk, and 15 minutes of doing nothing. In Vietnam, that can be ordinary. In Los Angeles, ordinary can become exotic, and exotic can become a $6.50 beverage. So yes, you could spend around $140,000 building a tiny Vietnamese sidewalk coffee shop in Los Angeles. You could need roughly 140 to 150 daily transactions just to make the economics comfortable. At 180 to 200 customers per day, the store starts looking like a real business. And if everything goes right, it could produce somewhere around $80,000 to $120,000 a year in owner earnings for someone who was heavily involved in the operation. But remember what you actually purchased. Not plastic stools, not coffee filters, not condensed milk. You purchased rent, payroll, permits, morning rushes, broken equipment, and the responsibility of convincing several thousand Americans every month that sitting on a tiny chair while drinking extremely strong Vietnamese coffee is a good idea. Fortunately, it probably is. So, you still want to own a Vietnamese coffee shop.